And he said, do you want to go back? I said, no, sir. I said, I sure don't. He says, then, and I was getting ready to get out because this was March of '66 and I was getting out in June of '66. And he said, you don't want to go back? I said, no, sir. He said, don't re-enlist. Because the captain had already come around and asked me if I wanted to re-enlist. And I said, I don't know. I said, we'll see how things go. I said, if I can get out of this secret situation and get back into a base where it's normal, I said, I might do it. I might re-enlist. But I said, as it stands right now, I said, I don't think I will. And he says, well, what kind of clearance you got? And I said, well, I got a crypto clearance. And he says, you ain't going nowhere, buddy. He says, when you go out of here, you're going right back into another top secret. I said, well, I don't want that. And he says, well, don't re-enlist. He said, don't re-enlist. And he told me that several times. And then he left. And this captain came back around and he talked to me and he says, did you ever decide whether you're going to re-enlist or not? And I said, you know, Captain, I said, I don't think I will. I said, I don't think I will. He said, well, we'll give you $1,000 and we'll make you staff sergeant. I said, I don't think it's worth that. And he said, man, he says, you're passing up a good chance here. He said, if you want to stay in, he says, you're only going to make rank this way. Because he says, once you make staff sergeant, he says, you'll never get tech, not being a cop. And there wasn't too many tech sergeants in there, a lot of staffs, but not many techs. And it was just almost impossible to be a master sergeant in the air police field. So he's just kept pressuring me, and I said, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to go.
What did you do as a career after the war?
You know, when I came back from Germany, of course I got married right away. And it wasn't too long. About a year after that, I had a kid to support. Oh. And I was still a young guy. I was only 22. I was 22. And I tried different places. I worked. I tried to be a insurance salesman. Guy offered me a job as a can't think of the name of this insurance company. Familiar insurance company.
Is it something that's still here today? Is it an insurance company that's still?
Sure. Yeah, you're gonna name all of them, but you ain't gonna get to that one. Anyway, this guy offered me a job, so I went and I was selling insurance. I was an insurance salesman, so I was in a car all the time. I was in and out of the car talking to people, trying to sell them insurance. And they gave me the worst place to go to. I was right over in East St. Louis. It was at that time, it was what they called, what's this place just out of East St. Louis?
With a P.
I can't think of it either. But anyway, it was a bad area. It was a bad area. And there was always guys getting robbed down there. So I was always afraid that somebody was going to knock me in the head and steal what money I had, because I carried quite a bit of money. People would give me cash money back then. You didn't work with checks, you know. Right. Very seldom you ever wrote out a check or anything. You always paid for cash. And I'd come home with maybe $1,000 on me sometimes. So I was kind of afraid that somebody knocked me in the head, and it wasn't don't get me wrong, it wasn't a black issue. It was a white issue there because it was white then. But it was just that degraded bunch of people at that time that didn't want to work and wanted to live off the government, you know. But it was a bad place to go, so I didn't stay as an insurance salesman long. I heard that after I quit selling insurance, because the guy kind of did me dirty, I had lined up a whole company for this insurance company, and he stepped in and took it away from me.
Wow.
He stole it from me, is what he did, because he was my boss, and he got all the money for it,
Yeah.
and I didn't get nothing out of it.
Oh, that sucks.
So, you know, politics ain't only in Washington. They're in everywhere you go, there's politics. And so a guy told me, he said, Laclede Steel up in Madison's hiring. And I said, oh yeah? I said, oh, that sounds good. So I went up there, and I was making pretty good money then. That was about, I was making about 3.5, 3.25 an hour then. That was back in '66, you know, so that's pretty good money. And I worked my way up from being a shear helper to a shearman. That's where they cut reinforcement rods. And I used to bundle them up and tie them up, and cranemen would come along and pick them up and carry them down there. They were going somewhere, you know, in this area. And I went from that to the shearman where they cut them off. And finally they said they were needing some welders, and I took welding school, and I went over and took tests and passed the welding test. So I was a welder over there for, I guess, 3 or 4 years. I worked my way up to where I was almost making $4 an hour. And back then it was super good money, but welders was making good dough back then. And any specialty trade was making good money. So I stayed there, and my father-in-law kept after me to come work where he worked. He said you wouldn't have that long drive, because I had to drive from Dupo all the way to Madison. And he said, come work with me. And I said, you think I can get hired on there? He said, yeah. He said, I can get you a good job out there. So I went down there and talked to them, and they hired me. And I took chemistry in school, so I was a pretty good chemist too. And the job I got was working in they made zinc. It was a zinc company. And what we did was we made the solution that went through the bars and that there to make that zinc. They'd grind the ore way out there in the other building, and then they'd bring it in and they'd make a solution out of it, and then they'd take that was clear off the top of it, and they'd send it over to us, and we'd add chemicals with it, acid and different things, and then it was ready to go to the stripping room where they stripped the zinc off of them aluminum rods that they'd have in there. And at that time I was making about $4.50 an hour, doing good money. I bought an ice box for Cheryl, and a new washer and a new dryer, paid cash for it. That was good money back then. Didn't have to put it on charge or anything. So I was doing real good. Plant shut down. So I got to be several different things through my lifetime. I got to be a diesel mechanic, an auto mechanic. I've done a lot of things. I took the test up in Chicago for to be a carpenter. I passed the carpenter's test. I passed the welding test up there, so I was state certified. I was state certified electrician. I did a lot of electrical work. When you're a young kid that's never been anything, you have to. Necessity is the mother of invention.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ever forget that. When you got a wife and a kid at home, and then by that time I had 2 kids at home,
Mm-hmm.
you was getting a necessity.